Matt, I wanted to have you on last week because I was really obsessive over just this tech situation, and I wanted to think about how to really, what the game plan should be in a Biden administration to break up these monopolies. But last night, I just kept thinking, Matt Stoller must be losing his mind, and my entire opening was about thanks Obama, you created this mess. So can we just start with that?
Sure. I mean, you said it.
No, but you have been beating this drum for so long, and you get a lot of heat for it, and you got a lot of heat for it. But listen, the shellacking in 2010, I think, created a situation of voter suppression. His inability to invest in state parties really created this opening for working people who were hurting after 2008 to be swooped up by these pseudo-populists. I mean, that's just my theory on this and how it's really hard to move people away from that brand, no matter what you do and no matter what kind of election it is. But, you're much smarter than I am, so I want to hear your take.
Oh, stop it. I got it wrong. I was like, the polls are probably right, because polls are usually right, and they're not, apparently. Yeah, look, I mean, Obama was a bad president who hurt a lot of people, and Democrats refuse to deal with that. They won't even admit that Obamacare sucks, right? They're GoFundMe's everywhere being please, I can't afford surgery. And people are we have to defend Obamacare. And it's just, that's weird and dumb. And it's time to grow up and just acknowledge that it didn't work out. And we have to not admit it, right? People don't trust us because why should they trust us? The last time they trusted us, we screwed them over. I mean, it's not that surprising.
I mean, it's interesting because in my opening, I mentioned how Biden's actually underperforming Hillary Clinton right now. If Hillary Clinton were running right now with the same strategy, with this turnout, she would have won the votes that she lost, the 77,000 votes that she lost in the three Rust Belt states. She already won Nevada. Nevada wasn't on the map as a swing state in 2016. So, I mean, last night when we were doing our analysis on the majority report, I was I don't know if any Democrat could have won handedly in this environment. And if Bernie was the top of the ticket, I don't know, frankly. And I don't know if down ballot, I posed that question on Twitter. I said, if Bernie were at the top of the ticket, okay, maybe he would have won as Biden's looking like he's going to win. But would Bernie, down ballot, would they have hurt as bad as they did under Biden? I mean, this is horrifying. This is a shellacking.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, look, the reality is people want to pretend there are a lot of differences between Bernie and Biden and that there's all these fights between the center and the left. And my view is that's all basically fake. No one says Obama was a bad president. Trump, first thing he did is he was Bush was a disaster, 9/11 was a disaster, Iraq war was a disaster. And he made fun of Jeb Bush on stage for his brother being a screw up. And we haven't seen anything like that from the Democratic Party. And Biden and Bernie and all of them sound like they don't realize that people's lives have gotten worse and have gotten worse for decades now. I mean, and you could go back to Bill Clinton, who screwed the country too. But the reason we're not trusted is because we are not trustworthy. And we lied. And I think that's really the key here is it's people are how can people choose Trump? And Trump screwed up everything. And I agree with that. But I also get why people don't think that Democrats would be better. I mean, Obama screwed up everything and we can't even admit it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the other thing is that there's just been systematic bullying within the Democratic Party for 4 years. So we can't even talk about it. So we have to pretend we need to defend Obamacare, which is obviously bad. As anybody who's ever used the healthcare system knows, it's bad. It didn't, it's we hired a plumber and he didn't fix the sink, but we really like him. He's a great guy. So let's hire him again. And you're I don't know, maybe we should get someone who can fix the sink. And you're how dare you? Why do you hate that plumber? It's just weird. It's weird. It didn't work out. It's not personal. It just didn't work out.
Well, that's also part of
Nothing else technical about it.
The other side of that, I mean, there's also this, it's not just that they bully anybody who challenges Obamacare or I mean, obviously,
Why do you hate
Obamacare.
Obama? He's a good guy.
They're punishing, though. They punished Keith Ellison, who dared challenge Obama from the left,
right.
Policy-wise, and put in the genius Tom Perez, who has just, I don't know, done a great job rebuilding the party nationwide.
He's like, Democrats these days. It's like, wow, that guy, amazing.
We should give him a promotion, guys. I think he wants to be attorney general. Sounds great.
I mean, yeah, that's right. Make him president, you know.
But that was to stop Keith Ellison, who, thank God, is in Minnesota right now, taking on, you know, right-wing white supremacists. And then he punished Bernie. I mean, like, so much of it was because Bernie dared discuss maybe challenging Obama in the midterms or policy-wise challenging Obama. So much of this, I mean, I remember when I was covering the DNC chairs race, how many people were like, you are not Democrat, not because Bernie's independent and because the Hillary messaging. You are not Democrats because you are challenging our president and our president's party and the strategy. And it was like, I'm not challenging anything. You lost 1,200 seats. And now we're dealing with voter suppression laws. And women have to like drive to another state to get an abortion because, you know, they couldn't invest money in Arizona. Like, that's what happens when you're not leading a party. That's what happens when you're not leading a country. And if you don't let dissent happen in your party, this is how you get into this situation, is Republicans are able to capitalize out of a lack of a message that Democrats really should be speaking on the ground in many of these states. But, you know, that's my
look, I do policy work, right? I don't do electoral analysis.
Yes.
Because I think that the main, whatever, we don't get into that. But, you know, I worked on Dodd-Frank, and we all knew behind the scenes, I mean, it was obvious that it was just, you know, useless. And we all pretended politically, Obama and the Democrats are all like, we need to regulate Wall Street. How come these mean Republicans don't want to regulate Wall Street? And it's like, you gave them $1 trillion and then, you know, asked the regulators to like, maybe not let that happen again because it was awkward, right? That's what it was. And it's embarrassing and annoying. And, you know, it's annoying that Elizabeth Warren got up there and was like, we fought really hard and we got some random consumer protection agency that didn't matter very much. Like, no, we lost. Let's just admit it and let's have the fight. But we can't even admit that there are any disagreements because Democrats are such authoritarians. They can't even handle like a criticism of an obviously failed set of policies. Like, it's really bad. I mean, what Bill Clinton did was catastrophic, but then what Obama did was also catastrophic. And the thing is that messaging, we always talk, the reason I hate electoral analysis is because everybody was obsessed with like, oh, how's the right way to message? Where do you invest money? And, you know, field campaigns, all that other stuff. And I'm just kind of like, I don't care about that. I care about how you govern because I think that how you govern makes the decision for a lot of people about whether they want to vote for you or not. And we just pretend like Democrats, and this is bad on the left too. I am not exempting the left. I think the left is a disaster. We don't talk about government. We don't talk about governing. We pretend like, oh, Hillary Clinton was a bad candidate, which obviously was not because like Biden was the same. We don't talk about the fact that like the week before the 2016 election, millions of letters went out saying, congratulations, your health insurance premiums went up by 20% or whatever it was. Like, we don't talk about governing, right? But normies, normal people, that's what they want. They want to hear about policy, not the dumb decency porn that Joe Biden was like running on, right? I'm a good guy. And like, maybe he is and maybe he's not. Like, everybody knows Trump's not a good guy. Like, his voters know he's not a good guy, but they don't care because they're voting on policy. And that's way more mature than the nonsense we hear from the ivy encrusted technocratic dorks who run the Democratic Party. It's embarrassing and it's annoying. And think they should be like horribly embarrassed for what they did in this election and for the bullying that they've done for the last 20 years. I mean, as long as I've been in politics, like they did a bad job. And I don't mean that they did a bad job because they lost. I mean, they did a bad job because when they had power, they made people's lives worse so that they could make money. And that's wrong. That is wrong.
That's right. I mean, this is the amount of money that was lost. These are working people who want their material lives bettered, and they thought the makeup of the Senate was was going to influence that. And literally hundreds of millions of dollars.
Jamie Harrison was a tobacco lobbyist.
Thank you.
Like, he was a tobacco lobbyist, right? That's like, I get it. I get, poor, like, went
great story. Very nice person, by the way. Ran for DNC chair, great, but a lobbyist and doesn't care.
Yes, I mean, like, look, but the thing is that, like, tobacco lobbyist, right? You can go off and do something like bad or whatever.
So was Kirsten Gillibrand, by the way.
What?
So was Kirsten Gillibrand, by the way.
Yes, Kirsten Gillibrand, tobacco lobbyist. Like, she has no excuse, right? Jamie Harrison is like, I had to pay off my student debt, then go do something good for the world, then run for office, right? Mm-hmm. Being corrupt doesn't qualify you for Congress just because there are a lot of corrupt people in Congress. Like, this is the problem. You can't, well, I don't know. When I say this is the problem, as if I know what the problem is. We don't care what happens when we're in power. It's like, it doesn't matter. And now everyone's like, Joe Biden, he won't be able to do anything, even if he wins because of the Republican Senate. Well, whatever happened, like, Donald Trump doesn't seem to have that problem. Donald Trump seems to wield power no matter whether Congress is, red, blue, or whatever. Like, he just does stuff because Donald Trump wields power. He wants to do things. And, like, Democrats are already making excuses for why they don't want to wield power. Fundamentally, it's a moral problem. Like, Democrats have to decide that they want to run the country in a way that makes people's lives better, and they haven't made that decision. They've made the decision so far that they want to they want to be in positions of status, like little Tracy Flicks, so that they can feel that they are better than other people. That is the point of Democratic politics, and it is time to stop this nonsense. It's total garbage, and I'm tired of it. I've had it. Right? I mean, this is, like, obvious. Anybody who deals with big money stuff knows that this is what's it about. You deal with, like, mediocrities who use complex language to scare people into having opinions about their society. It's bullying, pure and simple.
And so this is a great change. I do want to talk about the monopoly aspect of this too, because I think it leads in. There's this authoritarianism in the Democratic Party, especially if you talk about money. I mean, it's a different level of threat that you get if you talk about money.
Karen McGinnis, who ruined the Iowa caucuses, is like a senior advisor in Biden world. Like, that is crazy. Like, she literally was in charge of building an app that ruined the Iowa caucuses. Sorry, I'm just like, there's so many pieces of evidence.
It's so there's two things here, right? Okay, we have a Democratic Party that's authoritarian, who ruthlessly punishes anybody who dare disturb the status quo or reveal information or follow the money or challenge monopolies or do any of this work. The real, like, we're not just talking about, like, battling it out in the primaries. We're talking, they make Oppo files the size of this on you, and then they, like, target you with, like, it's dirty. You'll get smear pieces on you, whatever. So they try to ice you out of jobs. I mean, I'm sure you've dealt with the worst.
I like to think of it more like positive. Like, I help pay for the college education of a bunch of lobbyists' children. Like, that's how I like to think of it, where they get to do smear campaigns on me. And, that's what they're good at. It's what brings them joy. So I think that I like to bring satisfaction to people. And that's what I feel about, like, the Google Public Policy Shop.
They can rent a public island for one of their, like, bar mitzvahs or something.
That's right. They need a purpose. And I give it to them. And so I feel like it's a nice...
You're such an optimist, Matt. Okay, I'm going to look at it that way now. Next time I get a hit piece on me, knock on wood. But there's, okay, so that's the authoritarianism in the party, right? And then there's this much bigger authoritarianism, which the tech monopolies, I mean, in the lead up to the election, I was extremely concerned just seeing, and it was a big part of our show, how propped up, and there were some stories like Mother Jones did an investigation, which is not necessarily a place I normally go to, but it was a pretty riveting investigation of how Facebook was punishing Mother Jones's stories and propping up, like, Ben Shapiro, who's the #1 show on Facebook, and all these right-wing shows. We know this, right? It's not just Facebook, it's everywhere. Right. But there was a stark difference in feeling, just as somebody who does, like, online hosting, from 2016 to today in terms of audience and the moment. And I have no doubt that played out in this election, at least down ballot, just not getting the views we had in 2016 on the left. And I'm really, really concerned on the movement side really concerned about this, because if you have a party, this is the perfect scenario for neoliberals: losing down ballot, having Republicans as their excuse for everything. Biden takes over the party again. They can be authoritarian with us. The movement is just going to have a harder time pushing them, and we don't have vehicles to get our voices out the same way. So, can you tell me, what's going on in the tech world? Help me understand it.
Yeah, so it's really scary, and you're right to be scared. And there also are really interesting opportunities here as well, because I think we're not the only ones who are scared. You basically have the concentration of power in our economy into the hands of 5 companies. And, Microsoft is one of them, so they don't really matter. Apple is like one of them, but they're not that important. But you have Google, Facebook, and Amazon. And Google and Facebook are the ones that you're probably dealing with. Amazon is more on the book side and a couple of other areas, but it's Google and Facebook that control the distribution of content. And they do this in 2 ways. They've centralized power through anti-competitive practices, and they've consolidated their communication networks, and they've used that communication network power to consolidate advertising revenue. And so they do 2 things with this. First is they kill pro-social spaces. So this would be the publishers and newspapers, shows like yours. They kill the financing so that people can't come together around useful information. And the second thing that they do is they promote anti-social spaces. So cheap content, people fighting with each other, being obnoxious,
really?
Any number of sort of conspiracy theory type of things. And that's the reason they do that, is because they make money selling advertising. And so they want you paying attention. And the easiest way to get you to pay attention is to give you content and produce that content cheaply. And conspiracy theories and lies and stuff like that are cheaper. And this isn't a partisan thing. Like it's on either side, or in lots of other random areas. So that's what they're doing. They're killing the free press, and they are growing sort of the unfree press, to for lack of a better word. And the way that you address, and this is a result of a lot of different forces, but the causal factor is the collapse of anti-monopoly laws. And anti-monopoly laws are things like antitrust. Antitrust law is designed to basically prevent anti-competitive behavior by large companies and by industrial companies, and then a whole bunch of regulations. So like common carrier regulations are what they're known as, but public utility rules, like net neutrality is one of them, or things like on electric utilities, things like that.
Right.
Those 2 bodies of law have kind of eroded since the 1980s because of the libertarians taking over the right, and then the consumer rights people who are kind of weirdly libertarian taking over the left. And so over that time, you've seen this like immense concentration of power, and then you saw the technological transformation because of the internet and digital technologies. And so not only did you have this roll up of power because of the changes to law, so that would be something like Walmart, which is just like a chain store, but now you also build a new set of companies on top of a new technology, only the legal framework promotes monopoly. So that's when you get Amazon, which is like a chain store like Walmart, but 100 times as powerful because of all the things that they can do with data and with the internet, and even with Google and Facebook. So it's a real crisis. It's a political crisis. And I think what you fear is, and what you sort of are sensing, is that there's an authoritarianism, there's a fascism inside of Google and Facebook that is not about any particular political party. Mark Zuckerberg was doing this with Ben Shapiro, but it doesn't really matter. He's doing it with anyone kind of anywhere. And that there is a sort of a sense within the Democratic Party that maybe we should align with Google and Facebook and use them to kind of crush our opponents, whether those opponents are Republicans or whether those opponents are on the left. And I think on the right, you see the same dynamic where a lot of people are like, well, these guys are dangerous. And then some of the people on the right are like, yeah, but we can use them to crush our opponents. Either way, what you have is both parties are fractured, because a lot of people, like basically the populists in both parties, are like, this kind of power is too dangerous for anyone to wield. And then the plutocrats in both parties are like, oh, cool, concentrated power. Let me see how I can do that. And I think it's really worrisome. I worry about a Biden McConnell arrangement, and I really don't think that the progressives have come to grips with what this means. And what it really means is if the progressives want to have any power at all, they're going to have to like rethink their assumptions about what kind of policies to pursue, about what kind of politics to pursue, but they're also going to have to start making alliances with groups of people that they haven't traditionally been willing to deal with. And that means compromise. And there are some things that like the left and progressives are really uncomfortable with, but they were soundly repudiated in this election. And I don't really, we're going to have to start being honest about a bunch of things that are really uncomfortable for progressives and Democrats. And this is not a centrist left-wing thing.
Like, are you? I'm assuming like maybe recognizing that you might have to team up with folks that may not necessarily have the same identity politics that you do. Is that what you're saying? Like the rural city divide?
I haven't I haven't figured out how to say it in a way that like will make sense.
Get you canceled?
No, I mean, like there's a sort of set of annoying arguments that I think it's really easy to fall into. And I think it's not, and I don't want to fall into those arguments because I think they're simplistic. Populism is about, I come out of a sort of a populist tradition. Populism is about having gone to Harvard in a boarding school, right? My yeoman farming tradition. But like populism is about respecting craftsmanship and respecting the art of work.
Yeah.
And respecting everyone having the same rights and having access to capital and a little bit of capital and access to markets and being, whether you're educated or not, being treated like a citizen and having sort of the same rights as everyone else. It also means hating McKinsey and fundamentally believing McKinsey is evil or malevolent or a threat to democracy. And I think that like there are a lot of racial implications and gender-based implications, but it's fundamentally about class and about elitism. And I think that it's important to recognize that a lot of the kind of arguments that we make about questions of identity are actually questions of like in-group signaling among a bunch of different elitists. And it's hard to make the argument there without sounding boring and without being intentionally misconstrued. But that is, I think, like a large part of the dynamic. And it's what, Trump feeds off of. It's what like neoliberals feed off. It's what the left feeds off of. Everybody gets this kind of like energy. It's like political meth. It's really bad for you. And I think we have to like look at the tectonic plates of our politics, which is, how we do business with one another, right? That's like the fundamental question. It's like, how do we do business with one another, which is not just an economic question, because business is also a cultural question. It's a question about families. It's a question about identities. We are all workers. We are all producers. We are all lenders. We are all borrowers. And these are fundamental questions. I mean, most of the states, the first law that they passed was a law against usury, right? This is thousands of years. It's religious. Like these are questions that are fundamental. And I think that this is the sort of the left-wing tradition of just thinking about like, oh, well, we just need to equalize resources really leaves these questions out. This is not about making sure that everybody is equal. It's not about treating everybody like we're walking spreadsheets. It's about making sure people are roughly equal, right? That nobody is too rich and nobody is too poor. But it's about making sure that people are free, right? And that's, I think, really the core part of it. And like, we haven't spent time, like you are not free to interact with your audience because you have an intermediary screwing around with them, which is Google or Facebook. And they are manipulating that relationship. That is a lack of freedom for you. It's a lack of freedom for your audience. It also has financial implications for you and financial implications for your audience. But those are also cultural implications, right? And there are political implications. And I think we have to recognize that all of these things are part of what we're trying to describe when we're talking about populism and identity. And it's so easy to avoid dealing with that because the neoliberal framework is designed to say, oh, that stuff is too complicated. What we really need to do is talk about messaging and narrative and all of this like postmodern garbage.
But they don't. I mean, that's the other thing. They don't. They didn't have a message. I mean, you talk about the economy. a really interesting aspect of this election was in districts where there were higher concentrations of COVID deaths, they voted for Trump. And I think it actually is tied to Trump wanted to open up the economy and Democrats were just like, no response.
Somebody said something I found really interesting, which they were like, Democrats can't believe that somebody who so egregiously mishandled the pandemic did so well. And they're like, then they don't pay attention to the fact that Andrew Cuomo is insanely popular and totally mishandled the pandemic.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, I think that like, who's that guy, Trevor Noah on The Daily Show, the Cuomo sexual thing, when it was just like, that was just horribly embarrassing. Like Andrew Cuomo really mishandled the pandemic.
But he made people feel like that he was in control, just like, Trump.
De Blasio mishandled the pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember I was one of the few people on the Democratic side being like, hey, this pandemic is really serious back in February. And I remember a whole bunch of people on the left, including members of Congress, that people look up as leaders, were being like, the most important thing is to patronize Chinese restaurants, right? It was like, that's embarrassing. And like, it's a real problem because there obviously was no serious, and I mean, yes, there was some like racism against Asian Americans, and I don't want to minimize that because that's important, but there was a global pandemic that has completely restructured our world, and that is more important, and nobody took that seriously until the stock market started to like get shaky. And then everybody was like, oh my gosh, this is for real, including people on the left and the right and the center. And it's like, I'm sorry, but a progressive movement that only recognizes policy problems when the stock market gets shaky is not a movement that any of us should want to be associated with. Just reality.
Matt, oh my God, I want another hour with you. Hope you can come back on because I think this is the big question now is how does the progressive movement toughen up a little bit, get really strategic and ruthless and that includes, I mean, I look back at Bernie's campaign and I don't feel like they were ruthless enough. I don't feel like they were surgical in the way that the Trump campaign, as crazy as they are, they were surgical.
Bernie's a mess and he's kind of like a coward and doesn't want to upset Democrats. I mean, this was the weird thing about the campaign. It's like Elizabeth Warren ran this really elitist, annoying campaign, but she actually scares Democrats. Like if you're dealing with the Senate, like people don't like Elizabeth Warren, but they're afraid of her and she wields power. Bernie, nobody cares. They're like, oh, he's a kitten, whatever. He'll never challenge anyone or cause any real problem. Right. And it's like, it's not just being nice. Like, I mean, that's I think a gentle way to put it. And I think it's an unfair way to put it because what it really is Bernie is not interested in wielding power. And I think that's like, fundamentally it's immoral. I believe it's immoral to run for president if you have no intention of either winning or wielding power. And I think he got a little bit better on terms of wielding power in 2020, but not that much better. And I put it on him. I don't put it on the campaign. He's very micromanagey. He like runs this stuff himself. And I say this, I respect him, but I also feel like it's time to like recognize that this was a failed experiment. And I was in the progressive movement from 2002 onward. And I just like, it's a failure. Like it's time to like recognize it's a failure.
That's it. It was a very hard, last night we had this conversation live on air and people did not like it. And it's like, okay, we love Bernie. I love him. But we failed. And a lot of folks behind the scenes have been holding back on assessing it because of this presidency. But now is the time where we have to sit there and say X, Y, Z reasons why we failed. And we've got to toughen up and we have to read our history because my God, it's like, it's insane, the repetition. But anyways, that's for another conversation. Matt Stoller, you're amazing. Thank you. You're the perfect. It was like cosmic. We were trying to book you, and the day after the election, perfect person to talk to about how to toughen up.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for watching and listening to The Nomiki Show. But remember to click like and subscribe on YouTube and please share on social media. If you're not already a patron, please join us for as low as $5 a month on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for early and special content. That investment makes a huge difference. We are not corporate media raking in the dough. It's really you guys that are keeping us going. So please consider being a patron. And to our current patrons, thank you so much. We are incredibly grateful to you. We also now have swag. So check us out on the nomikishow.com to get your mugs, your totes, and your stickers.